Hey, Richard Matthews here again, and in this portion of the video series, we're going to talk about probably my favorite subject when it comes to economics and finance, and that is the 140 years of history, which is the last 140 years we've got, where we went from gold being our currency back in the late 1800s, or gold being our money, to the US dollar, which we have today, which is backed by nothing, or backed by what it says, say, the good faith and credit of the United States people. So we have something that's backed by nothing now. And in this portion of the video, we talk about that history very quickly and go through all the major points that happened that allowed our government to basically take our dollar and remove the value from it. So now for the last several generations, we've had a valueless dollar. There's no backing for it. So I hope you enjoy this section of the video, and I'll see you at the end. 140 years of monetary history in 10 minutes, which is just a brief lesson on the dollar. And I'm going to go through this pretty quickly, and Fabian, feel free to kick in and say anything you want to say on these couple of slides. But the dollar basically used to be a claim check on gold, right? And you can actually see that in the slide here. It says $20 in gold coin payable to the bearer on demand, right? That's what this means. You could take this dollar or this $20 bill and go into the bank, and they would give you a $20 gold coin. That's what it was. It's like, you go to the dry cleaners and you give them your shirt. What they give you back is a claim check on your shirt, right? So that claim check is as good as owning the shirt. This $20 bill was as good as a claim check on the gold, right? So you could go into the bank and exchange it for the $20 in gold. That's what the dollar was when it initially came out. So it wasn't actually a currency at this point. It was
exactly, a redeemable certificate.
Yeah, redeemable certificate for gold. So, and then basically after a certain period of time, gold became fiat. And fiat's an important word, so I stuck the definition up here. Most people, I didn't know what fiat meant. Along with fungible, I also learned what fiat meant. Fiat is a formal authorization or proposition. It's a decree from the government, right? Edict, order, command, injunction, proclamation, mandate, dictum, whatever you want to call it. It is the government saying this is the way it is because we say it is. Right? So the dollar became fiat, meaning it has value because the government says this is the currency and it has value, and well, we have the guns, so there, right?
And what, Richard? Are you trying to say, Richard, you don't believe government? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
That's what I'm trying to say. So because the dollar was just a receipt on gold, the government was capable of printing more receipts than they had actual gold in the bank. So if you could imagine you were a local dry cleaner doing this, right? You had given them your shirt or your $20 gold piece, and they gave you a receipt back. And then the next 4 people who came in, they also gave them a receipt for your shirt. And if you all came in to get the shirt at the same time, you'd have to fight over who got the shirt. That's what happened, right? That's what they printed more receipts than they had gold, right? So this means the value of the currency is no longer the actual gold, but by decree of the government, which basically it allows the government to spend beyond its means because they can print, quote unquote money, or at this point it's currency. I missed my my bullet point there. Governments don't like gold because they're getting away with fiat currencies, right? Gold, a sound money system, would restrain a government from spending beyond its means. And how terrible would that be? I mean, to actually be fiscally responsible.
Yeah, no kidding.
So anyways, so in the dollar was a receipt for gold from 1873 to about 1910, right? A $20 bill, receipt for money, equals $20 gold piece. That's what they looked like in 1849. Go to your bank, give them a receipt for money, and they would give you your money or a $20 gold piece in return. Sound money. America grew rapidly. Our economy grew rapidly. We became very powerful in the world. During this period. Anyways, it was wonderful. Sound money is a good thing. Real capitalism. Anyways, World War I happened around 1910, and they stopped redemption rights, which means you could no longer take your receipt for money and get real money, right? So the government started printing more receipts than they had for gold, right? Than they had in actual gold. That's where the dollar stops being an actual money and starts being currency. So that's World War I. And in World War II, between the wars, the gold exchange standard was started. So currencies become partially backed by gold. The Federal Reserve was allowed to print $50 of bills backed by only $20 in gold, or what they call a 40% reserve ratio. And that's during the Great Depression. That's what the picture is there on the right. And then World War II happens, right? World War II, for the first 4 years or so, the United States wasn't in that war, which is very, very important, right? Because every country in the EU started buying goods and services from the United States because all their factories and all their goods were going towards the war. They had to get stuff from us. So they were buying stuff from us and paying us in gold. So Americans believe that war is great for the economy, which is entirely untrue. It's only true if you're not in it and you're selling them the tools of the trade. By the end of World War II, the US had 2/3 of the world's monetary gold, which is pretty amazing, and it's what made us a superpower. A lot of people think it's because we helped win the war. It's not. It's because we had the gold, and when you have the gold, you get to make the rules. So that's what happened at the end of World War II. Anything you want to say on that? Because I know that's a pretty meaty subject, Fabian.
Yeah, no, there's definitely a lot to that, and I agree that people will say and still believe to this day war is good for the economy. Actually, war for people that participate in it, like you said, Richard, is probably the worst thing because it is such it transfers resources that could otherwise have been used for growth and for building long-term wealth in the society. It transfers it to rebuilding stuff that was blown up, or building planes that are shot down from the sky. So it's just a complete transfer of wealth in the wrong direction. It's a misallocation of money, really, really in a bad way.
And on top of that, when you take your soldiers and you put them into a foreign land, you are paying them. They still have to eat. They still have to do things. They still have to live. They are taking the currency from your economy and putting it into the economies of wherever they are at war. So it is definitely bleeding currency out of and value out of your economy and into another economy. So war is not good for the economy, despite the overwhelming amount of people who believe it is.
Yeah, and then real quick on that point too, Richard, like this really hit it for me with respect to how bad it is for the economy. It takes a regular U.S. soldier. It's about $1 million to train a regular U.S. soldier, and when they're sent to Iraq or Afghanistan and they're killed by a 20-cent AK-47 bullet. It shows you just a kind of small snapshot, rather grim, but a small snapshot of how bad war is for the country.
Not to mention the people who get shot by the 20-cent bullets.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's World War II and what happened and how we became a superpower. Most people, again, think we became a superpower because we helped win the war. We became a superpower because we got all the gold during the war. Very important point. So 1944, the Bretton Woods system was created, right? There's a little sign from the Bretton Woods Monetary Conference. Every currency, with the exception of a few, was decided would be backed by the dollar, right? The dollar would be backed by gold at a rate of $35 an ounce, which gave stability to all the currencies because none of these countries had gold anymore. Their currencies were all unstable, so they all decided we're going to peg them all to the dollar. The dollar's pegged to gold because the United States has all this gold in the bank. So at that time, there was no such thing as Forex, right? Currencies didn't float in relation to each other because they were all tied to each other at a fixed rate, right? So there was no reserve for how many dollars we could print, though, which is, I think, part of the reason the whole system failed. But anyways, so we printed lots and lots and lots of dollars, way more dollars than we had gold to honor that $35 per ounce. So we could pay for things like the Korean War, for Vietnam, for Johnson's Great Society. We printed more dollars than we had in gold to back up the $35 ounce system that was established. And we'll talk a little bit more of that in a few slides. But basically in 1959, the French president realized that we didn't have the gold to back all the dollars we'd printed. So France very publicly asks for all their gold back, trades in dollars for gold, and all the other countries start doing the same thing. So from 1959 to 1971, we lost about 50% of all the gold we had earned during the first 4 years of World War II, right? But we still had 12 times as many dollars floating around the world as we did gold in the vaults. So it was a giant worldwide run on the bank, which in this case was the United States. This was the second time the US had committed fraud and printed more receipts for gold than it had gold. And then basically in 1971, Nixon saved the world. Sarcasm, fully there, right? Nixon had taken us off the gold standard in 1971 because as soon as we had run out of gold in the bank and there was one more dollar brought back to the US that we couldn't produce the gold from the vaults for, the entire world's monetary system would have collapsed overnight because everything was tied to the dollar, right? So as far as Nixon was concerned and all the people who supported this, they were saving the world from monetary collapse at the time. So they kicked the can down the road to us 40 years later, right? So 1971, the global financial experiment began, also known as the dollar standard, right? We mentioned this at the beginning. The global experiment was that all the world's currencies would become fiat currencies at the same time. Interesting thing about fiat currencies, they have a 100% failure rate. There is never once ever in the history of the world ever, not one. Let me repeat that. Never, ever, ever has a fiat currency ever not failed. So we started this experiment where all the world's currencies would become fiat currencies at the same time, and they have a 100% failure rate. Unless we think we're some amazing people and our fiat currencies aren't going to fail, at some point, our fiat currencies are going to fail. It's what history shows. So today, 40 years of currencies being printed and falling in relative in value to gold, all currencies are going to continue to lose value and continue to lose purchasing power. This little slide on the right here shows that fiat currency isn't a store of value and can't be money, right? So the value of the dollar from the Federal Reserve in 1913 has fallen 95% for as far as its purchasing power is concerned since the inception of the Federal Reserve in 1913. Thus, you need more money, which is real currency grade gold, and less fiat paper currency like the dollar and right now nearly every other paper currency on the planet. Anything you want to say about the 140 years of history in 10 minutes before we move on to the 7 stages of empire, Fabian?
Well, yeah, I think we nailed it. And I think I would just say that with respect to fiat currencies, many people may know the average lifespan is between 29 and 37 years. Those have all failed. The only one still in existence, likely on its way to failure, is the British pound sterling. It's been around about 300 years, but it used to be backed by, I think, 12 ounces of silver. Now it's backed by, of course, no silver whatsoever, and or 16 ounces of silver. And now it's backed by no silver whatsoever. And, it's a total horror show. And that's basically what the history of fiat currency is.
They all fail.
Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that short section on our monetary history. It's one of my favorite subjects to study. And now you sort of know how we got from money being gold to what most people think money is, our currency today, and how we got there. So in a couple more videos, we're going to talk about where we are now, which is the petrodollar, and how that system is beginning to fail, because that's where our dollar is deriving its value from. But more importantly, we're going to talk about in the next video is the 7 stages of empire, because what's interesting is that every major economy in the world throughout history has gone through the same stages to get where we are today. So we can look back in history and see how these things have happened in the past and make educated guesses about what might happen in the future if we continue down the same path we're going now. So I hope you enjoy that, and I'll see you on the next video.